Well, hi there, everyone. Again, I'm so happy that you stopped back in with me today. It's the start of a new year. It's now 2022, and utterly amazing. Time has gone by so fast. What I want to do today is take a look, because in the spirit of New Year, let's take a look at a road to a new beginning. When you study the book of Ruth, it's usually central to what's happening with Ruth and the love story with Boaz and the as Boaz is our redeemer. But today, what I want to look at is the fact that this road to a new beginning is not always that easy. Okay? Our story begins in the beginning part of the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 says, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab." Famine in Israel was common, and many times you'll find that God moved in these periods of time to move groups of people in different areas. Famine caused Abraham to migrate. Famine caused Jacob and his family to migrate to Egypt. So in this case, you find that Naomi and her husband have had to migrate out of the land of Israel here, and they went over here into the land of Moab, which is present day Jordan. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to the country of Moab and remained there. These would be ancestors of Jesus that came actually from Bethlehem, the same place that we studied when we studied the Christmas story. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. Now they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. Naomi was in this area in Moab and Jordan for at least 10 years. Her husband had died, and then her 2 sons married. Then Mahlon and Chilion also died. So the woman survived her 2 sons and her husband. What a terrible position for Naomi to find herself in at the beginning of this story. In ancient times, as in many times in different cultures, it's necessary for the woman to have male relatives to take care of her. They were the ones that were responsible for bringing in the income to feed the family, raising the sheep, being a shepherd, whatever that might be. For her to find herself with nobody, her husband has died and her 2 sons, she's in a bad way. Now the Moabites were descendants of Lot, and when you read the story of Lot, you'll find that that's where he went with his 2 daughters into the cave area. He never reconciled back with Abraham. So now Naomi has to make some hard choices, and that's what I want to concentrate on today with this story, rather than the normal emphasis, like I said, on the kinsman redeemer. We can study that at a different time. Today, I want to talk about this situation in life where we are faced to make hard choices. Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. So she hears the news that, hey, there's food back in Israel. So she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. Then, and I like that word then, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me." She gives her daughter-in-laws a choice. She knows she has to return home. She has no choice. But they are Moabites. They have a choice. So here we have a situation where she's looking out for their welfare rather than her own. Surely it would be better for her to at least have someone to go with her home. And she obviously loved her daughter-in-laws, but she's looking out for their best interest, and she thinks that might be for them to go back home to their parents. So she discusses it with them of what to do. The daughter-in-law said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands?" Turn back, my daughters, go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. At this point, Naomi feels like many of us have felt, I'm sure, at different times in our life, that the Lord has abandoned me. The Lord has done this to me. He's done this on purpose to me, when in reality it's not that at all. But she can't see that yet. We're gonna see that a little bit later. But she wants them to have a better life. She wants them to go back home and have other husbands. They're widows, they can remarry and have maybe children of their own. She wants what's best for them. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her mother and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. Orpah decides to go back to her parents. Ruth doesn't want to do that. Ruth is clinging to Naomi. She won't leave her. They have such a strong relationship a beautiful relationship between a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. I was blessed. I had a mother-in-law like that I loved just as much, if not more, than my own mother. And I'm sure that that's the way Ruth feels about Naomi. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. She pledges her future to Naomi. She reassures her that this bond between the two of them is so strong that she will never leave her. So they leave together. What a beautiful picture, isn't this? Every time I go over this story of Ruth and Naomi and read these verses, I think, what a strong love they had for each other. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the two of them continued on their journey. And when they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. Remember, these people traveled in caravans and on donkey, slow. You know, it wasn't like the car sped into Bethlehem at 60 miles an hour and pulled over to the curb. Many people saw them coming and went out to meet them and found out that it really is Naomi. Is it really Naomi? The women asked, because she's been gone for 10 years or more. But some people do recognize her and realize who it is that's coming home. Notice what Naomi says. Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. This word Mara, we come upon this one time before in the Old Testament when the waters were bitter, when Moses was leading the Israelites into Mount Sinai area. They came upon a water source and the water was bitter and they called it Mara. That's what she says. She says, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. She still feels at this point that it is God that has done this terrible thing to her. So even though Naomi can't see it, God is already working and has a plan for her future. So let's see. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem. So they left Moab and they travel around here and they get back here to Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Think about that. They get there at the beginning of the barley harvest. This is in the spring when they harvest the barley, not later in the year, not at the end of the harvest. Again, we have this specific timing, in the fullness of time type language. At the beginning of the barley harvest, God is setting up the plan and causes Naomi and Ruth to arrive at just the right time when workers are going to be needed for the barley harvest. So how many times have we had to start over? How we had to turn back in heartache, feeling like it was the end of the world, only to discover that God already had a plan. My particular path in life has been filled with that, of ripping away, tearing away, and building back up, and tearing away and building back up. And there were many times that each one of those terrible events felt like, to me, it was the end of the world. And yet now, as I sit here and look at that, I realize God was steering me even when I couldn't see it. And that's what you have to see in this picture of Naomi. Naomi, that God is steering her even though she can't see it. A new life or a new chapter was ready to begin. Did we realize that it was just the beginning of the barley harvest for us? When we found ourselves in this situation, did we realize that it was the beginning of something new? It felt like it was the end, but in God's eyes, was it really the beginning? That it was just the beginning of a new chapter? And looking back, can we now see that God had a plan for our future already in place? That's what's about to happen with Naomi. God's plan was already in place. Naomi didn't say, oh, I think I'll go home to Bethlehem. And then God said, oh, okay, well then maybe I better do something for her. No, God already had the plan in place before it ever happened. So sometimes we have to decide that the plan God has for our future is better than what we're leaving behind. That is hard. When these crossroads come to us in life, where we have to make a choice, either to leave a job or move from the home we are into a different area for many reasons, either retirement or job change, or maybe a relative that needs us, or when these things happen with jobs, maybe you took a job that you thought was where you would stay the rest of your life, and then the management changes and you have to move on, or these types of upheavals come all different times in our life. And as we approach them, we need to realize that maybe it's God that's moving us into a different direction. We have to be ready to leave behind what's there in order to embrace what God has in front of us. This is hard. This is not easy. And Naomi doesn't know it yet. God's plan is already in place. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. One day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it. And Naomi replied, all right, my daughter, go ahead. Now this is the law of gleaning. What this was a law in the Old Testament that when you harvest a field, you were not to pick up every single grain, every stalk. You were to leave some there because there would be poor people that would come in behind you and they would be the ones that would pick up the leftover. So that's what Ruth says. She realizes we need food, and we have to support ourselves somehow. We have no man to take care of us. So she decides to become a farm worker and to go out into the field and just pick up what's left over. So Naomi agrees. So that's what she does. She follows along behind the men and women that are gleaning the field, and she's picking up the leftovers. Boaz is a relative of Naomi's and the owner of the field, and has also heard about Naomi's situation. So he treats Ruth with kindness. And it isn't just a coincidence that Ruth decided to go into that particular field. That field was owned by Boaz. Well, Boaz already knows the situation with his relative Naomi. He knows that her husband has died and the sons. He's aware of that, and then therefore he treats Ruth kindly. He watches out for her. He provides extra food for her and things. And Boaz says, yes, I know, but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law. He's speaking to Ruth. Since the death of your husband, I have heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. So he assures her that he knows what the situation is, and he's kind of taken her under his wing as far as watching out for her in the fields. He tells his workers to watch out for her too. So may the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done. Boaz says that Ruth has come under the protection of God's wings as a reward for what she has done for Naomi. And she replies to him, I hope I continue to please you, sir. She replied, you have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I'm not one of your workers. And then Ruth, this is a mistake here. Ruth went home and told Naomi everything. So she's picking up these leftovers, back-breaking work. She picks up the leftovers and places them in her apron and takes them home. And with that, Naomi can make bread, and they can live, they can survive. So Naomi tells her daughter-in-law, may the Lord bless him. He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed. Not just is Ruth allowed to stay at the beginning of the barley harvest, she's allowed to stay through the whole barley harvest until it is completed. This is a steady stream of food supply for her and Naomi. This is the way that she's supporting herself and her mother-in-law. So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. So months have gone by, and Ruth has faithfully worked in Boaz's field. One day, Naomi said to Ruth, my daughter, it's time I found a permanent home for you so that you will be provided for. Naomi realizes that this is a temporary situation. She doesn't want Ruth to just spend the rest of her life gleaning grain and bringing it home to her so that they can survive. So she goes on to say, Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his young women. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. So Naomi sets a plan in motion that will secure Ruth's future. She's looking out for Ruth. So tonight she says Boaz will be winnowing barley. What that means is they'll take the barley and throw it up into the air, and the seed will fall and the chaff will blow away. Now do as I tell you. Take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking, which is late in the evening. Be sure to notice where he lies down, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He'll tell you what to do. Now this was a custom. This sounds strange to us, that you would go into a man's place of sleeping and uncover his feet and then lay down there and wait till he wakes up. But apparently this was a custom that was an acceptable thing to do. So that's what she does. She goes and places herself at the feet of Boaz. This is a form of respect. This is a form of a servant's heart. She's not there for any other reason other than to ask him this most important question. So Boaz wakes up. And Boaz tells Ruth, and now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request. She requested Boaz to redeem her and Naomi. He says, I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I'm a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. There's an obstacle in the way. There's an obstacle in the way of Naomi getting her land back and providing a future for Ruth. Boaz said to the family redeemer, this is the other man who is ahead of him, you know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you. The man replied, all right, I'll redeem it. So Boaz went to the other relative, the nearer relative, gave him the opportunity to buy the land. Remember, this whole thing is about the purchase of the land and redeeming the inheritance for Naomi. Then Boaz told him, of course, and he throws this in after, of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. So the guy backs up a few steps and says, whoa, I didn't know I had to marry Ruth. I can't redeem it. The family redeemer replied, because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it. So for some reason, he's not in the position to do it. Maybe he already has a wife he can't have a second wife. Maybe this would be against his personal desire to do this. Maybe, because at first he said he would purchase the land. But as soon as it's introduced that he has to take Ruth as his wife, he backs off and says, no, I can't do it, so you do it. Boaz then said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, you are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon, and with the land I have acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses today. In the Jewish laws, they were very strict about land staying within the clan. If they were from the tribe of Judah and they owned the land in Bethlehem, it was not to pass to strangers. It was to be kept in the land. So a relative would be in the position to buy the land back, to keep the land in the clan. That's what they're attempting to do with this redeeming situation. They want to redeem the land so that a child can be raised to continue the inheritance of that particular piece of property. So Boaz does this in front of witnesses so that everyone agrees that this land has been purchased and that he has now the right and the privilege of taking Ruth as his wife. In Ruth 4:12, it says, and may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah. The town wishes him well and hopes that the Lord will give them descendants by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth into his home and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman of the town said to Naomi, praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. This baby is now the new redeemer of her family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons. So the women in the town rejoice with Naomi that this baby has been born. This is a new situation now. This is a new place. She's not in the place that she was when she left Moab. She's returned home. God has worked the plan. Boaz has taken Ruth. A baby has been born. It's a new beginning. Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he were her own. The neighbor women said, now at last Naomi has a son again, and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. We know that King David descended from the tribe of Judah, and this Obed, this baby that was born, was David's grandfather. And through King David, also he's an ancestor of Jesus. When you look at this chart, which I've, in my live teaching, I've showed this to you before. I don't know if you can see it well enough on the screen, but Jacob had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. And he also took their slave women as wives, Zilpah and Bilhah. And through them, 12 sons were born, and they became the 12 tribes of Israel. So this genetic line that we have just traced comes down through Leah. Jacob and Leah had a son named Judah, and Judah is where King David comes from, and eventually Jesus. So this baby Obed, born here, is the grandfather of King David and eventually a relative of Jesus. So God moving Naomi out of her terrible situation into Bethlehem produced an heir that is in the genealogy of Jesus. Isn't that amazing? Sadness and loss turns to joy and newness of life when God is the one working the plan. There are times when we try to work our own plan, don't we? We make moves that we think are good for us, and maybe they're not God's will for us. But when we are moved by God's will and do things His way, the ending is always so much better. And that's what happened to Naomi. What seemed like the end of the world turned out to be the beginning of a new world. She has this new baby. Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he were her own. And the neighbor women said again, "Now at last Naomi has a son again," and they named him Obed. What a wonderful verse. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David, which we just said. When God gives you a new beginning, it starts with an ending. Think about that. When God gives you a new beginning, it starts with an ending. Something has to end for a new beginning to begin. So we have to be thankful for those closed doors. They're painful sometimes. They result in anxiety and fear and depression, and they're not easy. They often guide us to the right one. When we are in the valley where we can't see the road up ahead and the doors closed, it's hurtful. It's hard. Many times in grieving, we find ourselves in that situation. We can't see how anything good could ever come of this. And you know, it's awful. But we have to trust God during those times that He will remake something new out of something that has ended. He may be moving you into a different place. This happens with certainly in situations of divorce or job changes or when a company closes and some of those devastating events. We have to trust that God is going to open a new opportunity for us. So we have to say, thanks be to God. We serve a God of new beginnings and a God of second chances. That's what Naomi had. She didn't know she had it, but she was going to have a new beginning. And God was a God of second chances, a second chance to have renewed life. Because Jesus said, "Behold, I make all things new." Thank you, Jesus. Okay, friends, so taking a little different look at this story of Ruth and Naomi, rather than concentrating today on the Redeemer aspect of this story, I wanted to concentrate on Naomi's journey, how the sadness in her life led her to move, and how God worked a plan and provided a future for not only her, but a future for Ruth and a future for Naomi. Okay? All right, friends, that's it for our little lesson for today, and I hope that you'll join me again next week, and I'll bring you another Bible character and another story. So let's close in prayer. Dear God, we thank you for these opportunities in our life for a new beginning. We just pray, Lord, that during those times of terrible ordeal when doors are closed, and we just pray, Lord, that you walk with us during those times. And help us to know that if we find ourselves in these times, that you're still there. You're still working a plan behind the scenes. And it is in your desire to make newness, bring newness into our life, no matter what the circumstances are. No matter what our age is, there is still newness of life when we walk in your will. I pray, Lord, that you'll keep us safe this week and that you'll bring us back together next week and we can look at another Bible character and see an aspect of your grace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, friends, that's it for this week, and I hope you'll jump in and join me again next week. Thank you. Bye for now.